Welcome to United News, Mr. President. Thank you for finding time for this interview. You have just returned from meeting in Europe, and before that you had presented your victory plan in the Verkhovna Rada. Prior to that, you had been in the Balkans. Is there any feedback yet?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and our viewers. I had a rather long trip. I presented the victory plan, part of which is to strengthen our fighters, to strengthen our army. First of all, I showed the plan to the United States of America. The feedback was almost immediate. Our team went there with Chief of the General Staff Barhelevich and Deputy Prime Minister Stefanishina. They worked on issues related to our membership in NATO. As for their point about strengthening our army, as for the feedback, I am waiting for the White House team in Ukraine. We are waiting, and they will be here soon with some answers. I also had a conversation 2 days ago with the President of the United States of America. We received a package worth $500 million. And we also agreed that we would receive assistance to our army every 2 or 3 weeks. I won't tell you the details because I am not authorized to do so. But you will see them later. I think their packages will be large, from $500 million to $750 million. And I think it will be a fairly quick process. The victory plan envisages strengthening Ukraine as much as possible in the coming months. This applies to the United States of America. A rather complicated issue also depends on them. An invitation to NATO. We are working on it. Then I had meetings with representatives of the G7, France, Germany, Italy and the UK. We had a very positive meeting with France. Part of the plan is to strengthen our army so that we have brigades with quality equipment. Minister Umerov was with the President of France, where our brigade is being equipped and trained in France. By the end of November, this brigade will be in Ukraine. France is ahead of everyone else in this. We had a very good conversation with President of France. I think that France will support Ukraine's accession to NATO. Emmanuel will personally do this, and I think he will work with our partners on whom a positive decision depends.
Позитивне рішення цього пункту. Складним досі є пункт щодо пакету стримування ракет.
The issue on deterrence packages, namely long-range missiles, is still complicated despite the fact that we have a full moral and legal right to defend ourselves and to use appropriate weapons if Russia doesn't want to end the war.
І використовувати відповідну зброю, якщо Росія не захоче закінчити війну. Принаймні, ми можемо вже частково використовувати таку зброю.
At least we can partially use such weapons in winter because we are threatened with blackout.
Майже офіційно блекаутами точно. Так, тому я вважаю, що ми маємо повне право на це. Незважаючи на це, питання це складне, важливо.
This is a complex issue. It is important that the countries that are addressing it have different attitudes to it.
Вони по-різному ставляться до цього питання. І це дуже важливо, тому що є
There are countries that are positive about it.
А так як це ризиковане питання, якщо вам дають відповідний
This is a risky issue.
сильних ракет, то кожна з
If the US, the UK, France, Germany and Italy give you very powerful missiles, then none of these countries wants to take risks alone.
І зрозуміло, що ніхто наодинці не хоче ризикувати. І тому ті країни серед цієї п'ятірки, які вже
These 5 countries are already on our side in this regard.
на нашому боці з цього приводу, і дуже важливо, що вони почнуть працювати і допомагати мені дуже сильно в діалозі з партнерами, щоб все...
It is important that the response is positive.
Хоча це складне питання. На жаль, країни-лідери ще не позбавились.
At the same time, many countries, unfortunately, have not yet got rid of the desire not to close the door on the Russian Federation.
З Російською Федерацією.
This is my opinion. This is my impression.
Тим не менш, продуктивний був візит, і
The visits to Italy and then to Germany were also productive.
є питання далекобійної зброї, воно...
It is clear that the issue of long-range weapons is the most painful for them.
Я вважаю, що питання... Ми багато говорили про...
We talked about the future of Ukraine and NATO. For me, the German position is very important because I believe that today skepticism remains among Germans.
У німців, і ми ближче до НАТО зі Сполученими Штатами, ніж колись були.
Unlike in the US, we are already closer to NATO. We also had meetings with the Balkan countries.
Там були зустрічі з балканськими країнами, важливі зустрічі, тому що вони розуміють навіть більше, я це говорив, навіть більше.
They understand us even more than the Baltic states.
Якщо Україна не витримає, і тут ми об'єднуємо всі балканські держави, навіть ті, які між собою не мають такого, знаєте, міцного політичного.
Although the Balkan countries do not have a strong political union because of their history, because of the wars they had.
Балкани, він дуже добре об'єднує всі балканські країни, і вони зараз розуміють, що під ризиком, якщо Україна...
They now understand that if Ukraine doesn't stand,
вони...
they will be at risk because Russia has a great influence there.
Високим ризиком, тому що Росія має там впливи.
Mr. President, given the complex and positive reactions you have described, how will the plan be further developed? Do you see any room for changes? Are you ready to adjust any positions?
А вже ж, вчора я представив...
Of course, yesterday, I presented this plan to all the leaders of the European Union, although strengthening Ukraine doesn't depend on all of them.
Тому що ви знаєте, що є скепсис у деяких.
Some states are skeptical. It is very important for us to preserve the unity of the European Union.
Берегти єдність Європейського Союзу, і я відкритий абсолютно.
And I am open to comments. For example, yesterday 18 countries came up with their opinions.
Країн вийшли зі своїми думками. В нашому діалозі були, і вони хочуть деякими речами.
They want to strengthen Ukraine. For example, the sanctions policy should be detailed and realistic.
Наприклад, санкційна політика, яка повинна бути відображена, яка повинна бути детальна і реальна. Всі визнають, що та санкційна політика, яка була застосована,
Everyone recognizes that the sanctions policy that was applied to Russia because of its crimes is flawed. It is effective, but not enough to reduce Russia's defense spending.
Поки що вона дієва, але не настільки, щоб зменшити витрати на оборонку Росії. Тобто вона так не б'є по ВВП Російської Федерації, що Росія і її країни-союзники обходять.
That is, the Russian Federation and its allied countries are circumventing these sanctions. Of course, I am glad that both President Michel and President von der Leyen are 100% on our side.
Повністю, 100% на нашому боці. Я радий, що ми змогли побудувати за ці останні...
I am glad that we have been able to build such 100% support from the EU and its leadership over the past few years. And they understand that sanctions are working, but they need to be strengthened.
І вони розуміють, що санкції діють, але треба посилюватись.
Mr. President, there is a rule that when you criticize in a reasonable and constructive way, you should then offer an alternative. What about the West? There is already information about the involvement of North Korean troops. There is a triad, China, Russia, North Korea. This has already gone beyond the context of the war against Ukraine. What does the West offer? What does the alliance offer? We see a rather restrained reaction to point one of the plan. I mean the invitation to NATO. But what do they suggest? What is their victory plan? And what is the way they see to end the war?
Дякую за запитання. Передусім, знаєте, і формула миру, і саміт миру, які були запропоновані ще 2 роки тому.
Thank you for your question. The peace formula and the peace summit are not just our way of ending the war. We have to understand that the plan to strengthen Ukraine before the next summit is not for show.
Перед дипломатією, перед наступним самітом миру, цей план перемоги, щоб виключно посилити Україну. Це ж не просто так все відбувається. Все це інформаційний, ідеологічний простір. Якщо Україна
If Ukraine or its allies do not fill the information and ideological space, everything will be completely filled with suggestions from the Russian Federation or its allies,
Федерація або її союзниками, або навіть країн.
or by those countries that do not understand what will happen to Ukraine afterwards, because we are very far away from each other. I am not even talking about distance, but about the economy and the future.
І тому я вважаю, що будь-яка пасивність
That is why I believe that any diplomatic passivity will lead to Russia simply uniting countries around its ideas. And these ideas are already being voiced all the time, and it seems to me that this is very, very dangerous.
інші країни народжують, так? Вистрілюють, вибачте. І мені здається, що це дуже, дуже небезпечно. Тому ви праві, і багато країн об'єднано.
Many countries in the United West understand all this. They understand the total influence of Russian information policy in the world, in the global south, in Europe.
Інформаційна політика в світі, на глобальному півдні, і в Європі. Ви ж бачите, що відбувається з політикою Європи.
You see what is happening to European politics, right? The number of parties that are emerging and have a pro-Russian orientation. Russia is working very actively, lobbying both politicians and information platforms.
І інформаційні майданчики. І вони розуміють, що Україна бореться, план перемоги сьогодні.
And they understand that Ukraine is fighting. The victory plan is a new stage after the Kursk operation, which stopped Russia and their information policy. They said they were winning, and it was everywhere. They started this trend. The Kursk operation stopped it, and again, there was a distrust of the information that Russia was spreading.
Недовіра до інформації, яку розповсюджувала Росія. Ну, на жаль, їх слухають. На жаль, є все одно, знаєте, як лідери, так, Україна права.
Unfortunately, they are being listened to. Some leaders say that Ukraine is right, that Ukraine is a victim in this war, and Russia is the aggressor. But still, Russia is protecting its population. I don't even want to talk about these narratives. I'm sad that after almost 3 years of war, these narratives are still perceived like that by some politicians.
Майже 3 років війни, все одно ці наративи мають таке сприйняття у деяких поодиноких політиків. Тому дуже важливо, щоб була не тільки створена хвиля, що вона принесла
That is why it is very important that we fight this.
принесла цей результат. Україна знов в топі.
The Kursk operation helped us. Ukraine is back in the top. People believe in Ukraine again.
Наративи Росії, що ми програємо війну.
They question Russia's narratives that we are losing the war, and then they ask us what we have to offer, and we give them the victory plan to strengthen us and force Russia to sit down at the negotiation table with all the partners or with some representatives at the summit.
План перемоги для того, щоб посилити нас.
Because if Europe and the world are divided, Russia will not negotiate anything.
Партнерами або з деякими представниками на саміті. Тому що так просто Росія.
Russia wants to negotiate only with ultimatums. The victory plan is very important in that regard too.
Про що домовлятись? Бо вона хоче домовлятись ультиматумом. Нічого не змінилось в цій системі координат. Тому план перемоги дуже важливий і для цього також.
The first point of the plan is criticized by some representatives of the West. They do not yet have a unified position. But what do these critics suggest instead? What should be the way to end the war? What is the guarantee?
Інших гарантій. У них немає альтернативи.
There are no guarantees. They have no alternative but what our side has suggested. Yes, they can tell you about the frozen conflict. They can propose to stop now. Okay, the question is what happens the day after tomorrow?
Питання. Що буде післязавтра? Що буде післязавтра? Чому він
What will happen the day after tomorrow when Putin gathers his strength again? And why there will be no full occupation of Ukraine or such an attempt?
повна окупація України? Або спроба повторити 22-й рік. Хто гарантує?
An attempt to repeat 2022. Who can guarantee it? No one is raising a hand here. No one guarantees anything after Budapest, after Normandy. Yesterday at the meeting, one of the participants was skeptical about the peace plan. I don't want to say who exactly, and Emmanuel Macron said, I was in Normandy. We were sitting together with Putin, and he gave us his word that we were having peace talks, that there would be a ceasefire.
Нам давав слово, що у нас мирні перемовини, що буде ceasefire. Реальне ніхто не буде
That no one would use powerful weapons, that there would be a ceasefire, that there would be a prisoner exchange all for all. And Macron said that we can no longer trust just the words of this side, because they have not fulfilled anything they promised.
всіх на всіх. І він сказав, але ми не можемо довіряти вже просто словам цієї сторони. Вони не виконали нічого. І тому всі розуміють, що просто в це ніхто не вірить і просто...
Therefore, no one believes in this, and a simple umbrella will not protect any of us anymore. And we are asking for a serious umbrella, serious security guarantees. What is the alternative to NATO? Please tell us.
Яка альтернатива НАТО? Ну скажіть, будь ласка. А мій аргумент щодо Будапешту, що ми віддали відповідну зброю.
As for Budapest, we gave up our weapons. It seems we had to exchange weapons for NATO. That's what we should have done. We should have given up our nuclear weapons and become a member of NATO and the EU.
НАТО і ЄС. Цього замало. Безпека, вона різна, як ви бачите. І коридори...
Security can be different, not only armed security, but also economic security. This is an open market, and the largest market is in the EU. We have to be equal members of the EU. Therefore, when we talk about security guarantees, we ask them to offer us what works. That's it.
Можна те, що працює? Те, що працює, нам запропонувати. Ось і все.
I'll pick up on what you said about NATO's nuclear weapons. Natalia Ostrovska, 1+1 TSN. Yesterday in Brussels, you revealed some details of your conversation with Trump. You mentioned nuclear weapons and NATO. Bild has already written about how long it will take us to build the first bomb. And some experts have noticed that our conversations with our allies are turning into ultimatums. Tell us, who among our international partners called first when you mentioned nuclear weapons yesterday? And did they understand you correctly? Which countries definitely do not want to invite us to NATO? You have already said that there are some problems with Germany. What are their arguments?
Що стосується ядерної зброї, по-перше, ми не збирались створювати ніякого.
As for nuclear weapons, first of all, we did not intend to pose any threat to the world, and we do not intend to develop nuclear weapons. I want us to understand that some media platforms have been releasing false narratives. I want us to be understood correctly.
Хочу, щоб нас розуміли дуже правильно. Я вважаю, що Україна повинна бути в НАТО, і аргумент
I believe that Ukraine should be in NATO, and my argument is that under the Budapest Memorandum, we gave up our nuclear weapons and were guaranteed security and territorial integrity of Ukraine. This is what we are talking about. If Ukraine had not given up its nuclear weapons, it would have been exactly the same umbrella that other nuclear powers have. But NATO is better because we are a peaceful state, and for us, NATO membership is better than any kind of weapon.
Ми мирна держава. НАТО краще на сьогодні, ніж будь-який вид зброї. Тим більше такий загрозливий, так? Але ми не отримали нічого за це.
Especially such a threatening one, but we have got nothing. And I say nothing because the piece of paper that we received was violated, and the countries that are guarantors and signatories to the Budapest Memorandum did not stop Russia, because this agreement was violated back in 2014.
Вони не зупинили Росію. Тому що порушено було ще в 2014 році.
Back then, part of our territories was occupied, and our partners, the world's nuclear powers, who guaranteed our territorial integrity, did not stop Russia. Moreover, they did not reject Putin on his territory and did not put an end to this issue. This is what I'm talking about.
Ось про що я говорю. І тому на сьогодні виходить, що якщо ви подивитесь на всі країни світу, де немає воїн, це країни або НАТО,
If you look at all the countries in the world where there are no wars, they are either NATO countries or countries that have the appropriate strong dangerous weapons.
І Україна не отримала Ні першого, ні другого немає.
And Ukraine got neither the former nor the latter.
Про які я аргументи говорив. І
These are the arguments I told my partners and the United States, and yesterday at the meeting I do not want my words to be distorted.
І я не хочу, щоб мене перекручували. Я просто сказав, що Україна...
I just said that Ukraine gave everything and received nothing. We did not receive real protection. That's why the only real thing we have today is NATO.
Говорю, що із того, що є сьогодні на столі, що реально, це друге, це НАТО. З цих двох пунктів.
Who will not sign Ukraine's invitation to NATO?
Запрошення я не бачу серйозних ризиків. Не підпишуться, я вважаю, ті, хто
I believe that those who want to leave room for dialogue with Russia will not sign. I think so.
або залишити простір в діалозі з Росією. На мою думку, так.
Mr. President, if the countries do not reach a consensus on our admission to NATO, do we have a plan B? Perhaps something similar to the way America cooperates with Israel. And yet, the victory plan in many points still depends on our Western partners. And if we give them such leverage, won't this affect our actions then? They might make a decision and not ask us if we agree.
What kind of decision?
For example, about negotiations or about borders.
Якщо вони не будуть вам допомагати,
If they do not help us, this one will put us in a difficult situation. Today they are helping us, and we should treat them as partners.
повинні відноситися до них як партнерів. Так, не старших партнерів, не найголовніших, не тих, хто вас примушує, але
Not as senior partners, the most important ones who force us to do something, but as equals. You can't just take help and that's it. It's just not fair and not right. As for your first question,
що стосується першої частини, якщо можна.
first of all, everything can change after the elections.
І коли ми обговорюємо, а які ще можуть бути плани, тут така ситуація, що головний донор в допомозі Україні – Сполучені Штати. І якщо
And when we discuss what other plans there may be, we have to remember that the main donor of aid to Ukraine is the United States. And if their policy changes after the elections, these changes are plan B.
зміниться, ось ці зміни і є план Б. Тобто сама по собі політика Сполучених Штатів буде впливати.
The policy of the United States itself will influence the evolution of this war or the evolution of the end of this war. And today no one can really tell you how it will be because now you can hear different voices.
Як це буде? Тому що електоральний зараз період виборів Сполучених Штатів, заяви можуть звучати різні. Багато всього може звучати на
A
підтримку.
lot of things can sound in support of Ukraine. Something can sound against that. And no one knows what will happen afterwards because today they are not fighting for Ukraine. They are fighting at their elections, which is right for their country, but not so much for us.
Для їх держави. Для нас не дуже. Ми вважаємо, що ми повинні залишатись в фокусі. Ми.
We believe that we must stay in focus. We here are citizens of Ukraine because we are at war, and the mood there is clear. In the US, elections are their own war. Yes, without bullets, but it is also a war.
Без куль. Але також війна. І там люди йдуть на ті чи інші кроки, ті чи інші заяви, ті
And there people take certain steps, make certain statements, and say certain words that Ukrainian society may not like. Unfortunately, this is their policy. We just feel very much that it is live, and it is very painful because we are at war.
дуже відчуваємо, що таке життя, і дуже боляче, тому що війна. А вони зараз, у них є своя держава.
They have their own state, and now they are having elections, and for them it is a choice of America's direction. For them, it is not just a choice of president, it is a choice of their development, their international policy, their influence, their ties with Europe, their support or not so lack of it for NATO. You see, they have their own challenges.
Європою. Їх підтримка або не дуже велика НАТО. Розумієте, да? Тобто у них свої є виклики. Безумовно, наше завдання.
Of course, our task is to do everything we can to ensure that Ukraine is not forgotten there and that we are a priority. This is exactly what I am doing, because if we didn't do this, they would forget what is happening in Ukraine because of their elections and with the help of Russia.
Росії, щоб забути, інформаційно забути, що відбувається в Україні.
In other words, we will make all the major decisions in dialogue and they will not force us to take a particular view. And you think that this cannot happen?
Це неправильно, несправедливо.
This will definitely not happen, and if we are forced to do something, you will all know about it.
Ти про це знати.
The victory plan is actually a pragmatic list of reasons why the West should help us. This is not only a struggle for democracy, light versus darkness, which seems to be so abstract for many countries, but also a concrete struggle for security in Europe, for the wealth of Ukrainian mineral resources. We didn't hear about commitments from Ukraine in this regard. What did you tell our partners? We know what you wanted to get from our partners, but what did we offer them in return?
А це ще причини, перераховані вами в плані перемоги.
In the victory plan, I just emphasized the reasons to help us for our partners who do not support us, who delayed the strengthening of Ukraine and thus delayed the end of this war.
Я вважаю, посилення України, а значить і затягують кінець цієї війни. В плані перемоги просто підкреслено дуже сильно, прямо, без...
The victory plan simply states that we need for Ukraine to be very strong, and then we can have a dialogue without coercion.
Не примусово, а в діалозі, ну, будь ласка, якщо у нас є invitation, у нас є...
If we have the appropriate weapons or even just positive support for this plan, it will be a step forward.
Активна підтримка цього плану – це вже крок вперед. Ти вже знаходишся в іншій...
We will be in a completely different position and will be able to conduct a diplomatic dialogue with the Russians, because they are everywhere and our partners see this.
Бо партнери їх бачать всюди. Ми не проти. Ми їм кажемо, що ви хочете, щоб ми з русскими говорили? Так, посильте.
This is why we propose to strengthen us so that we can talk to the Russians on an equal footing and not stand aside. Our partners need to know what the positive aspects of this plan are.
Точно. І вони повинні знати, в чому є позитив цього плану. Він не
And
залаштований.
our plan is very straightforward. It is designed so that Russians know what our partners will give us. They should know that we will use it if they do not want to end the war.
Вони не хочуть закінчити війну. Наше суспільство повинно знати, наш солдат на фронті повинен знати, що він не сидить просто в окопі і віддає свої...
Our society needs to know, our soldiers at the front needs to know that he is not just sitting in a trench and sacrificing his life, but that there are those who support him. He is fighting for his children to live in a state where there will be definitely no war, that his state and his children will definitely have protection.
Не перспективи. А що у її держави, у його дітей точно є захист. НАТО, ЄС, гарантії безпеки.
NATO, EU, security guarantees, a strong army, an army consisting not of 20 or 50 soldiers, as Russia ultimately offers us, a strong country that can protect. Then the negotiations are different.
Захисту. Тоді і перемовини вони інші. Тоді тобі не можуть просто сказати.
Then no one can tell you that if you don't do this tomorrow, you won't exist the day after tomorrow. No one will tell you that.
Так не скаже. Тому що є відповідь, яка, а вона вже...
Because there will be a response, which will already be in Ukraine, a deterrence package, appropriate weapons, appropriate number of troops and partners.
І партнерів.
If my colleagues will allow me, I want to clarify. You say that the plan is open and the Russians can see it, but there are secret annexes. Who are you not showing them to? Because there are some countries that support Russia or they're neutral with a hint of loyalty.
Я би так сказав, дві стадії. Додатки відкриті сьогодні і передані тим країнам, які...
The annexes of the plan are open and given to those countries that have what they need to strengthen Ukraine. If a state does not have this, then why give them an annex?
Іншій державі, навіть наших партнерів близьких, якщо у них цього немає, щоб нас посилити, то для чого давати додаток? Тобто, ми їм довіряємо просто, але для чого?
We trust them, but they don't need this annex. And there are other states that want to see the annex, but they did not help Ukraine during the war. So why do they want to see it?
Нічим Україні не допомогли. То для чого їм це бачити? Для чого їм бачити, наприклад, закрити?
Why would they want to see a secret annex about weapons if they are against arming Ukraine with weapons? It is nonsense. But they do have a plan, but no annexes.
Але без додатків. Ось для кого додатки. Це перша стадія. Стадія 2.
That's who the annexes are for. But if these countries are ready to support us and strengthen us, then I am not against this annex becoming open to them. On the contrary, I am in favor of our people seeing what's out there.
Щоб наші люди бачили, що там, і щоб русські бачили, що там. І тоді це будуть рівні перемовини.
And the Russians seeing what's out there. And then it will be negotiations on equal footing, because their society will know that an attack on our energy and blackouts will lead to an attack on their energy and blackouts. And then this is a completely different weight of diplomacy.
І тоді це різні, розумієте, різна вага дипломатії. Але я постійно підкреслюю, а в чому різниця, запитують. А я вам відповідаю.
But then I'm asked, what is the difference between us? The difference is that we will use this package only if the Russians do not end this war. Only then.
І в тому випадку, якщо русські не сядуть і не закінчать цю війну. Тоді.
I would like to ask you in more detail about those few points of the plan that were new to the general public. For example, the joint development of rare minerals with our allies or the Ukrainian military defending other European countries. We want to show that we are creating added value for our allies in the future. Can you explain your logic? Why you decided to focus on this?
Додана вартість. Раз, ви праві абсолютно. Друга історія.
Added value. You are absolutely right. The minerals that have been seized by Russia since 2014 on our territory are quite expensive, so you have a storage of coal and so on.
Дефіцит з вугіллям, тощо багато речей. А зараз вони вже наближаються до інших.
And now they are already approaching our other minerals. This is money. Our partners still buy them somewhere. They still invest their money.
Десь. Вони все одно вкладають гроші. Десь, не будемо говорити конкретно, десь деякі держави, які мали уранові розробки, тощо на...
We won't say exactly where, but some countries had uranium mining operations on the African continent. They were pushed out of there by Russia. Russia wants to control the relevant minerals and mineral resources, etc. But here, they are in Europe, in our country.
Корисні копалини тощо. І для них це шанс. А ось воно є в Європі у нас. А чи хочемо ми завтра, щоб Росія
Do we want Russia to seize this part of our territories tomorrow, and Russia, Iran, China, North Korea get hold on all of it?
Північну Корею? Ми не знаємо. Про що?
We don't know what Russia is negotiating with them when it gets something for them today. But we know that Russia is constantly promising these countries something.
Дешевий енергоресурс.
They are already giving away cheap energy. We know that. What else will they give away? On those territories they have seized in 2014, they have destroyed all the plants.
Вони ж всі заводи знищили. Тобто ось їх підхід. Тому
This is their approach. Therefore, this is an opportunity for partners. For partners, it is about the defense of Europe. For the United States, it is an opportunity to prevent Russia's allies from getting stronger with these minerals and this money.
в Росії цими корисними копалинами і цими грошима. І для них це інвестування. А тут ми підтримуємо це, будь ласка, тоді...
And for them, it is an investment. We support this. Whoever guarantees us security today with points from Victory Plan should earn money with us. This position is not for everyone, but only for the right partners.
З нами. І це відкрите не для всіх, а відкрите для відповідних партнерів. Давайте разом інвестувати.
Let's invest together, invest money, and it will work to strengthen these states. First of all, this is about the European Union, and you and I are interested in strengthening the EU, because we are future members of the EU.
Бо ми майбутні члени ЄС. Ось так це виглядає приблизно. Що стосується 5-го пункту, то Тут все просто. Цей пункт
This is how it looks like approximately. As for point 5 of the plan, everything is simple. This point, I think, is more popular with Republicans. But Democrats also accept it. There is the military of the United States of America who are located on the territory of the European Union.
Є контингент, є військові Сполучених Штатів Америки, які розташовані на території Європейського Союзу, і зрозуміло, що у нас після
We will have a large army after the war, and this is a fact. There are people who came to the war to defend Ukraine, and there are those who came to defend Ukraine having other professions.
захищати Україну, маючи іншу професію. Хтось з них
Some of them will return to their professions, while others will not want to be in the military. Many people's lives have changed.
змінили своє життя. І я вважаю, що люди, вони набули і досвід бойовий передусім. Частина з них мали тренування у складі.
People have gained combat experience. Some of the military had NATO training, but for the most part, all of these military have experience in using NATO military equipment, and they are not afraid of the Russians.
Використання натівської техніки. І друге, вони не бояться русських. Що дуже важливо, бо ніхто зараз не знає, як ті чи інші.
This is very important, because no one knows how certain NATO representatives will react if the Russian Federation attacks a NATO country. No one knows this because it is a war, because they have no experience.
Ніхто не знає, бо це війна, бо не було досвіду. Ну, не у всіх, а вже ж у багатьох був досвід в різних війнах, але не в такій війні.
Although many of them had experience in different wars, but not in this kind of war. That's why tens of thousands of our military can help NATO if they choose this path.
Можуть бути, якщо оберуть для себе такий шлях. Ну і людям дуже подобається.
And people like this idea very much. For example, countries like Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia are very positive about this.
Литва, Латвія, Естонія дуже позитивно до цього ставляться. Вони задоволені, вони бояться Росії. І зрозуміло.
They are afraid of Russia, and it is clear why. We can all see the face of modern Russia, so they would like our military to protect their borders.
Вони б хотіли, щоб наші військові захищали їх кордони.
You mentioned lithium. Vuhledar and Krakow direction is the territory where there are lithium deposits. Vuhledar is captured. It seems that the Russians are using all their mechanized military equipment to break through. And it is possible that they are not planning to launch Russian mining companies there, but to pay off China with these territories. And if we are moving on to business, you said that the interests of other countries' governments are focused on their votes. And if we move away from the fact that human life is the highest value, what can we offer to NATO? What could be their interest? How can we strengthen them as a NATO country?
Nobody wants to fight.
В світі ніхто не хоче воювати.
Nobody in the world wants to fight. There is no such thing as everyone being ready for it. No one of the NATO countries fully knows what will happen if there is a full-scale war.
Наприклад,
For example, on the territory of the European continent, on the territory of one of the NATO countries.
Однієї з натівських держав. Як будуть діяти країни НАТО?
How will NATO countries act? God willing, they will act together. But no one knows because there is public support in some countries, and in some countries there is no support.
А в деяких державах немає її. І це говорить про те, що будуть...
And this suggests that there will be difficulties. If there is a war on this or that NATO territory, what will happen?
Але в будь-якому випадку це буде війна вже...
But in any case, it will be a global war. Without Ukraine, it is definitely a world war.
100% це світова війна. По-друге, партнерам дійсно...
Our partners really like our experience. They are very interested in the use of their weapons by our guys.
Їх зброєю, нашими хлопцями. Цей досвід вони...
They are studying this experience, and we are hosting them here. This is open information for them, for those partners who provided these weapons. They are very satisfied. There is a lot of new things for them.
Для них
to discover, because we have experience. We know which military equipment justifies itself on the battlefield and which does not.
І це впливає на, ви розумієте, на гроші.
And this affects the partners' money, because they invest in the production of certain weapons. Now they cannot throw money away. They know what to focus on, what really works in times of war.
Що реально працює в час війни. Третє, завдяки саме нашому виробництву.
Thanks to our domestic production, we have some of the best drones in the world today.
В світі. Одні з найкращих. Але якщо ви берете ціна-якість, так? І кількість.
We were able to build production chains, create a good price, quality and quantity. They are very interested in this.
Тощо. І це вони дуже зацікавлені.
Our partners understand that today they are invested in our drones, and tomorrow we will be giving them those drones back.
Завтра я маю на
I mean, after the war.
І вони, дуже позитивно до цього ставляться.
And they are very positive about it. Scandinavian countries such as Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, they are very interested.
Ісландія, вони всі дуже зацікавлені. Зараз це один
Now it is one of the most powerful partnerships with Ukraine.
з Україною. Реально дуже сильний союз.
They are investing in our domestic drone production.
Вітчизняне виробництво дронів. Вони сьогодні номер 1. Зараз будуть.
They will be number one. The United States will also be investing in this after our recent agreements with Biden.
Це гроші, але на сьогодні це факт.
But they can provide us with assistance. We are grateful to these countries for helping us over the past 2 years. But we are looking at the pace of arms transfers. Only 30% of what was announced has been delivered. They are late. We needed fighter jets back in 2022. Won't they just give aid to support our forces without fear that Russia will go further because there is Ukraine? There are Ukrainian soldiers who have weapons from allies, but the number of weapons is only enough to survive.
I
don't know what our partners will do next. I told you, it seems to me that the countries are different and they have different attitudes to this war. But it is important for us not to lose this alliance. More than 50 countries are involved in Rammstein. This is a very important alliance, a very important support for us. As for your comment, it will not happen. Our allies will not support us only for the sake of our survival. I will be honest, there are countries that do have this attitude. They support Ukraine just for the sake of support. But thanks to the Rammstein, there are countries that want Ukraine to win.
А є країни, які хочуть, щоб Україна перемогла. І це факт, що це різні країни.
And most importantly, they are at the same table today.
Вони за одним столом. Вони сидять і допомагають.
They are sitting there and helping. Among them, there are those who are forced to help. They are against helping Ukraine, but for example, their society supports Ukraine, and they are forced to help.
Україна, і вони вимушено допомагають. То скажіть відверто, яка нам різниця, чому хтось із них
Why do we care about they help us? It may be for their own sake, or for the elections, or because of pressure from society, or they really want to help.
хочуть допомогти? Або хтось з них
Some of them are waiting for Ukraine to fail.
сьогодні.
We don't care why they help us.
Нам з вами треба.
You and I need to survive and win, and to do so, we need to keep the number of these countries growing.
А навпаки, боротися за збільшення цих країн.
We need to fight for an increase in the number of these countries, because now there will be elections in the US, and we do not know what will happen afterwards. We will see. We are working to ensure that the aid doesn't change, and we need not only to keep the aid, but also to increase it.
Збільшити.
You said that we can see the face of Russia, and every Ukrainian doesn't need to be told who the Russians are. But alongside with the presentation of the victory plan, Russia is organizing a BRICS summit in Kazan, which includes China, India, and the United Arab Emirates. Turkey will come to Kazan in Russia. This is an economic union. We see that the sanctions are in place. There have been strikes on oil refinery campaigns. How can we destroy Russia's economy so that it doesn't continue to create such anti-Western coalitions? At a time when all countries seem to know who the enemy is, but a huge number of countries are represented in Kazan.
The BRICS helps Putin show the world, and above all his own society, that Russia is not isolated.
20 країн приїхало, наприклад, так. Тому що там буде БРІКС плюс, як ви сказали.
20 countries will come to BRICS summit. The question is, at what level will they be represented? This is a very important question. I believe that the partners should work harder to ensure that not everyone comes to see Putin at the level of leaders.
До Путіна приїхали не всі на рівні лідерів. Мені здається, це важливо. За економічним союзом БРІКС, як ви сказали, насамперед.
I think this is important. At this summit, Putin will do his best to offer the world his formula for ending the war.
Запропонувати світові свою формулу закінчення війни. І для того, щоб його формулу...
And in order for someone to support his formula, he needs some kind of foundation.
Якийсь фундамент. І він розуміє, якщо немає...
And Putin understands that there are no United States, no EU, no Europe in general at the summit. He has big issues with Asian countries.
Простором, так? І арабські країни, вони все одно вони розділені.
And the Arab countries are divided. Putin had to find a platform, and the BRICS became such a platform.
Йому потрібно знайти було якийсь майданчик. БРІКС зрозумілий майданчик для нього, але я вважаю, що він буде будувати.
I believe that he will not build some economic relations and strengthen around Russia on this platform.
Навколо Росії. А саме найголовніше
The main task will be to promote Putin's vision for the end of the war.
Війну. А вже його бачення він буде прив'язувати до економічних здобутків.
He will tie his plan to the economic achievements of other BRICS countries. This is one of the most painful topics. I think it is a problem. We have raised this issue with the White House.
Болючих тем. І я вважаю, що проблемне питання, і ми піднімали це питання із Білим домом. І я вважаю те, що і те, над чим працює Росія, щоб Генсек
Russia is now working on getting UN Security General guarantees to attend the BRICS summit, and that's bad. These are all bad moments, bad signals, bad warning signs.
Погані сигнали, погані дзвіночки.
Is Russia now trying to organize its own peace summit?
Так і є, але вони не можуть зробити саміт миру, бо у них немає такої...
Yes, but they cannot organize a peace summit because they don't have as much support as Ukraine.
Давайте поспілкуємось на майданчику БРІКС, але повірте мені, це просто буде неформально.
But they are working on it. They want to meet in the BRICS format to have a dialogue on how to end the war.
Кінчити війну. Тобто вони ділять світ спеціально.
So they are dividing the world on purpose. They want to destroy the unity of world leaders around Ukraine. This is what they are doing.
Ось що вони роблять.
What about economic sanctions? How do we destroy Russia's economy? What is our strategy?
We need to implement the sanctions. The problem is that sanctions are being circumvented.
Є країни, які дають можливість їх обходити.
There are countries that enable Russia to circumvent them. There are energy sanctions that can simply stop the energy sector of the Russian Federation.
Енергетику Російської Федерації. Тут треба об'єднання Сполучених Штатів.
But this requires the union of the US, the EU, and some representatives of the Middle East.
Представників Близького Сходу. Вони можуть домовитись і там...
They can come to an agreement and reduce the profits of the Russian energy sector by several times.
На енергетиці Російської Федерації.
Since we started talking about economic aspects, I would like to ask about reparations. Now there is a statement that we can use the blocked Russian assets. Isn't this a substitute for reparations, or we will demand reparations from Russia later?
In any case, Ukraine will demand reparations.
Я не думаю, що це найскладніше.
I don't think this is the most difficult issue in the economy, but it is nevertheless very important for us today.
Дуже важливо. 50 мільярдів заморожених активів прийнято.
The Group of Seven voted to approve 50 billion of frozen assets to be used to finance Ukraine. This is very positive for us.
Для нас важливо, дуже позитивно. Зараз я був в Брюсселі, ми розмовляли і дуже хочемо, щоб Угорщина не блокувала.
We talked in Brussels to ensure that Hungary does not block certain steps, and then we will be able to get these funds faster. Part of these 50 billion, that is about 35 billion.
Європейська частина, мені здається, десь 35 мільярдів.
And Ursula von der Leyen and other EU leaders support this.
Лідерів ЄС підтримують саме це. Фізично ми зможемо отримувати ці гроші.
Physically, we will be able to receive this money in early next year. We talked about this with the EU leadership.
ЄС і траншево отримати ці гроші.
This money will help us a lot, but it is not a substitute for reparations.
Репарації – це використання справедливої частини російських активів. На що ми можемо їх витрачати? Ось
This is the use of part of Russia's assets. What can we spend it on? We have agreed with our partners that we would be able to use this money.
перемога для України, що ми можемо використовувати ці гроші, і вони будуть доступні для
For the domestic production of our weapons in shortage and to help people.
нашої зброї, там, де у нас великий дефіцит, ну і допомога людям.
And please tell us about the following. We started talking about the production of our weapons. We broadcast a lot of stories about our weapons. For example, every citizen can make drones at home. And in fact, there are many manufacturers who make drones now, but only a third of the drones are bought. I understand that maybe this issue is inappropriate during the war, but maybe it's worth selling them abroad to have currency if the state cannot buy everything.
Купити все, що зроблено.
Держава Україна на внутрішнє виробництво дронів.
Ukraine spent 48 billion hryvnias from the budget this year on domestic drone production.
З бюджету ДСТЗІ 48 мільярдів, Міноборони 50
The
мільярдів.
Ministry of Defense spent 50 billion on drones, and there are separate programs for combat units which cost about 20 billion.
То, що біля 20 мільярдів, тобто це
A total of 118 billion spent on drones.
десь 120, 118, 120 мільярдів. Окрім цього, ми домовились з партнерами, те, що я вам сказав, що
In addition, as I said, we have a strong alliance with the Scandinavian countries, from which we have already received 350 million euros,
550 мільйонів євро, тобто це десь
which is about another 30 billion hryvnias. This is 150 billion hryvnias that Ukraine has already allocated for the domestic production of drones.
А ми поставлене завдання, у нас є вже домовленості, десь біля...
We also have agreements and will receive approximately $4.5 billion for our production by the end of this year. We have an additional 150 or 200 billion hryvnias.
Це у нас з вами буде ще десь 150-200 мільярдів гривень.
350 billion hryvnias for domestic drone production in 2024 is a very serious result.
350 мільярдів на внутрішнє виробництво дронів за 24 рік. Ну, це дуже серйозний результат.
And so it will be. The result will be corresponding.
Тепер, що стосується всі ці гроші,
Both private manufacturers and state-owned enterprises will receive all this money.
підприємств. Ми ж з вами, ми дуже раді, що
We are glad that we have increased domestic production, that we have increased production lines, and that we have increased the number of drones we produce.
ми дуже раді. Так, вони не відвантажують.
Yes, we do not buy the drones for which the Ministry of Defense has not signed contracts, but we have to be fair.
Бути справедливими. Вони наростили таке виробництво
Manufacturers have increased their production thanks to this very domestic money,
грошам. Не завдяки якимось грошам.
not some other money. Now, as for the issue of exports,
Тому я вважаю, що якщо приходи до Міністерства оборони повільні, так, треба працювати з менеджментом.
I believe that if a manufacturer comes to the Ministry of Defense and everything is slow and there is no money, sometimes you have to wait a little bit.
Іноді треба трішки почекати.
We are at war after all.
Війна.
They need to work with the management of the Ministry of Defense, work on things speed up. I understand that production has increased for manufacturers, but there are priorities.
Серйозний момент.
Now about exports.
Я попросив
I asked the Ministry of Defense to think about what options there are to address to this issue.
Наприклад, я бачу вже пару ідей, я виключаю момент експорту, а він дуже
But I rule out exports. It is very dangerous. Our developments could end up in Russia.
Як це може бути в Росії? Раз. Друге,
We can also export only to countries that are part of the Rammstein alliance because they helped us.
можемо експортувати, бо вони вам допомагали. Третій момент, навіть серед тих країн Рамштайну.
But even among those countries, there are some that gave us money to produce drones.
І якщо ми говоримо саме про ці країни, і вони собі купують на свої склади, окей, ну тоді У мене питання. Як ви думаєте, якщо Данія дає 600 мільйонів...
Then I have a question. If Denmark gives us 600 million euros for the production of drones in Ukraine, does it really want to take these drones for itself?
Брати собі ці дрони. Да, тому я не проти, якщо щось розробиться, але...
I am not against developing a solution for this issue, but with all due respect to the Middle Eastern countries and other countries, I think we can only export to those countries that have helped us.
Я не вважаю, що ми маємо право туди експортувати. А Міністерство оборони...
The Ministry of Defense should develop an offer and accelerate as much as possible with additional money.
Додатковими грошима. Я їх попросив розробити на ставці, є рішення ставки, воно...
I asked them to develop a plan, and the Ministry of Strategic Industries of Ukraine has to develop contracts with our best companies that provide exactly the product that everyone wants to buy abroad.
Компаніями, які найякісніші, і у нас є, які дають саме той продукт, який використовується, і який, до речі, всі хочуть купувати.
We have to offer them contracts for 3 or 5 years. A long contract. We are working on this.
Такі довгі контракти. Ну, повинні розробити.
2 years have passed since the presentation of your formula for peace at the Bali summit. A lot has happened since then. Has your vision of ending the war changed? Has your approach to the possibility of negotiations with Russia changed during this time?
Дякую за запитання.
Thank you for your question. In November, we will have the detailed plan ready, as I said.
І говорив про це. Він буде готовий без затримок.
It will be ready without delay. We are holding thematic conferences.
Конференції. Всі вони йдуть.
5 such conferences have already been held. The first one took place yesterday.
Франції, говорив це президентові. 5-та конференція ядерна безпека.
For which I am very grateful to France. It was held yesterday in France at the level of energy ministers of our allied countries.
Велике
A
представництво.
large representation, a large number of countries and ministers.
Були все це підготовлено. Тобто тематичні конференції.
All of this was prepared. There were thematic conferences about each of the points of the plan.
Плану, але детальний. Вони проходять. Остання конференція буде 30-го.
In order to make the detailed version of the plan, the last conference will be held on 30th of October in Canada. We will discuss the humanitarian point,
Пункт повернення
the return of our deported children, and the exchange of prisoners.
полонених. З цього пункту буде проведена в Канаді
The conference will be held in Canada on this point, and the NSA, Justice Ministers, Trudeau, his government will be there.
Трюдо, а вже ж його уряд, будуть всі присутні. Це буде останній пункт, остання конференція. Після цього
Everyone will be present. This will be the last conference. After that, all the documents will be prepared.
план,
Those that will form a general plan that is ready for any negotiations.
наше бачення.
This will be our vision. It will be our vision, and it will be signed by dozens of countries.
країн. Тобто велика кількість країн. Далі після цього цей документ ми віддаємо всім партнерам.
Hundreds of countries, and then we will give this document to all partners who are ready for the next summit.
Готові до наступного саміту. І також вони повинні
They will have to pass it on to the Russians, and then we will wait for the appropriate feedback.
фідбек. Тобто цю частину роботи, яку ми обіцяли,
We have done this part of the work that we promised. Then we can have different formats for negotiations.
перемовин можуть бути. Але фундамент для всього цього вже підготовлений. Єдине,
But the only thing I wanted in addition to this document was to see Ukraine's position strengthened. Then we will be strong with documents, with the army, with an understanding of the future, and we can talk about something.
із зрозумінням майбутнього, де в яких ми союзах, це бажано.
This is the desired model. If this happens, we will follow this plan.
Як все станеться, ми будемо йти по цьому плану. Поки що так. Бажання у різних партнерів час від часу по різним причинам, знов-таки,
Yes, different partners of ours from time to time have a desire for direct negotiations with the Russian Federation
прямих перемовин з
for various reasons, electoral, internal, and other reasons. But we believe that there can be no negotiations about us without us.
без нас. І тому навіть такі формати, які ті чи інші партнери починають, знаєте, як, не знаю, підмивати, не можу знайти.
That is why even the formats that certain partners suggest, or rather to which they begin to incline us, are not acceptable.
Що там? Да. На мою думку, вони
In my opinion, this is what Russia wants very much.
дуже сильно, щоб розділені були, як вам сказати, всі.
To divide all the leaders and partners. Why is this happening and why can it be so?
Відбувається і чому так може бути? Наприклад, та чи інша країна
For example, a country starts a dialogue with the Russian Federation at the level of intelligence,
на рівні
technical level, foreign ministers, at the level of leaders. Another leader in Europe thinks that if someone else is doing it, then he can do it too.
це відбувається. Хтось інший також лідер.
And so does the next one, and the next one.
Почав, і я почав. Третій і четвертий. Чому вони це
Why are they doing it? Because within each country, society will ask why their leader does not do what the other leaders of our countries do.
лідер в Європі?
This is a G7 country. And this happens in every country. I believe that this is a desirable model for Russia. Why?
Бо потім буде конкуренція вже серед цих лідерів не з русскими, не з нами.
Because then there will be competition among these leaders to see who will lead the end of the war.
Закінчення війни. І ось в цій конкуренції ми втратимо
And in this competition, we will lose our alliance. We will definitely lose respect to each other.
до одного, тому що коли ти хочеш дуже швидке рішення,
Because when you want a very quick solution, it will definitely be at the expense of Ukraine alone.
тільки Україна. Не їх
Not at their expense, but exclusively at the expense of Ukraine.
Україна. Тому я і вважаю, що
That's why I think it's dangerous. We will try to keep the model I am talking about.
я говорю. Це не значить, що, як я і говорив, к представникам країнам G20 або країнам
I told representatives of the G20 and the Global South
глобального півдня. У Китаї, у Бразилії, у Африці
that China, Brazil, and Africa have their own ideas and formulas for peace.
є свої формули, начебто, так? Ну, але є пропозиції. Останній раз ми говорили з президентом,
The last time we spoke was with President Ramaphosa.
ми говорили, він сказав, що ми би хотіли бачити і наші пропозиції. І я сказав,
He said that they would like to see our suggestions. I said, okay, we don't mind. Indeed, we are ready to accept all the proposals.
де пункти ваших пропозицій.
But we are ready to include only those points of your proposals that are based on international law and the UN Charter in any plan.
Який план? Чому ні? Будь ласка. І непогана можливість в листопаді є засідання.
In November, there will be a G20 summit,
Там всі є.
and there will be representatives from different countries there. We proposed our formula for peace in Indonesia during the G20 summit.
Засідання двадцятки.
In November, there will be a G20 summit in Brazil. We can listen to their proposals.
Будь ласка, можемо взяти їх пропозиції і все це.
If it unites the world around one plan, I am for it.
Я за.
You mentioned the peace summit. What will be a sign for us that we are ready for it? How should the next peace summit differ from the last one?
Ну, ознакою, я, в принципі, вже сказав про це достатньо детально.
As I said earlier, the sign of our readiness is strong Ukraine that will be ready to attend the summit together with representatives of the Russian Federation. The main sign is that we have to come out of this summit with a result.
Представниками Російської Федерації, якщо головна ознака, якщо ми вийдемо з цього саміту з результатом. На мою думку,
I think we need a result. The result of the end of the war.
закінчення війни, закінчення хоча б гарячої фази війни.
The end of at least the hot phase of the war. We need a result for Ukraine and for the people. But a fair result. In my opinion, these are signs.
Бажано ще раз бути сильними завдяки плану перемоги.
To be strong thanks to the victory plan or thanks to the increased support of the United States.
Сполучених Штатів Америки на внутрішній підтримці
The internal support of the united Ukrainian society.
суспільству. Коли
When our country is united, it is very difficult to beat.
ось повірте мені, коли голоси з України йдуть за кордон в Європу,
When the United States and Europe think that we are not doing well, it becomes very difficult to achieve results.
там не підтримуються, там не в тому напрямку, тощо дуже складно, тому що це дає аргумент, якщо відверто, знаєте, як
Do you know how this happens? I've been through these dialogues and I've changed the minds of some leaders.
знов змінював думку того чи іншого лідера.
Можна я уточню ще тоді
Саміт
по
повинен
саміту
бути
ми
з
так.
документами. Я вважаю сильною позицією України. Я вважаю з детальним розумінням, з чим ми виходимо із саміту, і з більшістю країн. І тоді це буде мати результат.
In fact, Andriy Sybiha, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, says that we do not need a protocol event. Then what do we need? Do we need to announce some pre-approved decisions at the next summit? Or do we still see the summit as a platform for discussion and an opportunity to change someone's point of view?
Мені здається,
I think that some things would be done before the summit.
до нього. Я погоджуюсь з міністром закордонних.
I agree with the foreign minister. We need not just a protocol event, but something to make the end of the war closer.
До наближення закінчення війни повинні бути
Should be done before that. Only after that, a summit where we can discuss the next steps.
наступні кроки. Так, це може, але просто робити декларативний саміт.
But simply holding a declarative summit with 100 countries gathered and no result is not right for us.
Це не бажано для нас.
This is not what we want. We will then lose the opportunity to take the next steps to end the war.
Дякую.
Thank you. I want to come back to economic issues. You said that we are strong. Our strength is our army. You said that at NATO headquarters. But the military needs funding and upgrades, economic reservation. What is your attitude to this? And how important is it to implement this idea so that it is socially just? And so that it can affect not only those who are not yet mobilized, but also those who are already mobilized, because the law is the same for everyone.
Закон один для всіх, якщо економічне бронювання
The law is the same for everyone. Economic reservation is already working for strategic industries.
працює економічне бронювання щодо стратегічних галузей, то воно повинно бути
The reservation must be fair, but how to find this fairness? This is the challenge.
завдання чесно Міністерства економіки, передусім прем'єр-міністра України. У нього є це завдання.
This is the task facing the Ministry of Economy and the Prime Minister of Ukraine. The options that they have given me do not seem to me to be entirely fair.
Що тут
It is difficult to choose one profession among others. There should be other criteria. Profession is not a criterion.
щодо критичної інфраструктури і професій, без яких не може.
The professions without which the army cannot survive during the war have already been reserved. We understand that defense production is working and people are reserved there.
Що оборонка працює, а люди там заброньовані. В тому чи іншому виді, але ключові спеціалісти, вони всі.
Key specialists, but everything else is a really complicated issue. I think it is not resolved precisely because it is difficult to find this balance.
Воно не запроваджено досі саме через це, тому що знайти цей баланс складно. Військові бояться, тому що буде недостатньо.
The military is afraid that there will be not enough new forces. Business has a different attitude to this.
По-іншому.
What should be the criteria to ensure that not all business companies end up at the front? Otherwise, only big business companies will be reserved.
Дуже багаті прибутки.
We need to think about medium-sized business companies and small business. That's why I think there is no balance here yet.
Так не можна просто шашкою махати.
Mobilization from the age of 18. Some media have reported that international partners are putting pressure on Ukraine in this matter. I would like to hear from you what information you have. Are there any premises for lowering the age of mobilization? What needs to happen for this issue to be considered by the parliament?
Партнери хотіли.
The partners would like to see the age of mobilization reduced. In Ukraine, people are mobilized from the age of 25.
25 років. І ми
And we don't see any reason to make changes yet. I think it is dangerous today, but there is a tool.
Я вважаю, що це на сьогодні це небезпечно. Є інструмент. Для цього є інструмент. Будь ласка, у Міністерства оборони є
The Ministry of Defense has a service contract. It is possible to sign a contract of one's own free will.
по своїй.
Anyone under the age of 25 can sign a contract with the army if they wish.
Міністерство оборони повинно пропонувати спеціальні скажімо так, спеціальні.
The Ministry of Defense has to offer special contracts, special conditions, so that a person of any age wants to serve in accordance with the current legislation.
Має право йти і служити в будь-якому віці. Відповідно, чинного
So far it is like this.
ну поки що так.
You said that you were afraid of this issue because there may be an outflow of young people. Indeed, there is such a trend now. Some people's deputies give different figures for how many young people left at the beginning of the academic year. It's also a big challenge for Ukraine.
Наше майбутнє, це виклик.
This is our future. This is a challenge. In any case, in times of war, there is an outflow of people.
Ті інші люди, хто має право за законом.
Those who have the right to do so by law can go. They can go. But we have no plans to mobilize people from the age of 18 today.
З 18 років те, що хтось говорить.
There is a lot of misinformation now, and this is a big problem in general.
І це велика проблема в цілому.
Therefore, there are no such plans.
Немає.
There are none today.
Немає.
You said that the war will end with our victory. Will we have to sacrifice something? After all, for us, victory means regaining the 1991 borders. Is there a room for any compromise?
Складно говорити.
This is a complicated issue. In any case, we cannot recognize the occupied territories as the territories of the Russian Federation.
Російської Федерації. І це одне з найскладніших.
And this is one of the most difficult challenges because, well,
Тому що всі розуміють, що те, що зробив Путін, там вписав в
everybody understands that what Putin did by adding our territories to the Russion constitution is a serious problem. He just stole our lands.
то він просто вкрав їх, не тільки.
He didn't just temporarily occupy them. I am sure that this is a temporary occupation. Until Ukraine legally establishes something, this is a very serious point.
Дуже серйозний момент.
Because in life, things can turn out in different ways.
Залежить від нас, від нашої міцності. Залежить
It
від
all depends on us, on our strengths, on the tiredness of our partners or not,
зміни політики, багато речей. Але є історичний погляд на
on many things, but there is a historical view on this. Our borders are enshrined in our constitution and in all international documents.
нас з зрозумілими кордонами. Може бути по-різному.
Our borders are clear. In life, there can be differences, but until Ukraine legally recognizes certain territories or a temporarily occupied village as Russian, that land will still remain Ukrainian.
Воно залишиться українським.
Invitation to NATO. Permission to hit Russia with long-range weapons. Protection of Ukrainian sky by the air defense forces of partners, in particular Romania or Poland. These issues are part of the victory plan. They have been discussed for a long time and there is no consensus among our partners. Our arguments do not help. Russia keeps raising the escalation bar. For example, I was waiting for this permission to strike at Russia after the Russians launched a missile attack on the Akhmedid Children's Hospital. But this permission wasn't given. But you are writing this permission in the plan again. Why do you think something should change now?
If we don't put pressure, nothing will change.
That is, we need to demand more.
Навіть не більшого, воно може так і є, чесно.
Not exactly. Different countries have their own lives and opinions, and not everyone still understands that this war is not only ours.
Є життя і є свої думки. І не всі досі розуміють, що ця війна, вона всіх.
It concerns everyone. Some people think like this. We have great respect for Ukraine. It is a strong nation that is fighting for its existence, but this is their war.
Це їх війна. Є частина країн таких. І ми повинні
There are some countries like that, and we have to understand this. Sometimes you don't respect the opinion of a partner, but you have to understand it. It is easier for you then.
тоді легше. Просто легше розуміти, на що ти розраховуєш.
It is just easier to understand what you can count on and what is impossible.
І тому ви запитали просто про бити по Росії. Так, тому ми вимагаємо в плані, що
You asked about strikes on Russia. We demand in our plan that things that can really change and strengthen us. As for strikes at Russia, yesterday I was asked about this at the press conference.
запитання було на прес-конференції. Я чесно
I honestly answered that I remembered my dialogue about Patriot, and I remembered what answer I received. Don't even dream about it.
думаю. І було багато різного, різні.
And there were many sins like that. For example, it was the same with F-16 fighters.
Що все це там.
I'm not saying that it helped us end the war, but it is something that helped us survive and preserve ourselves and our country. This is a fact.
Україна факт. І тому, треба...
We need to work every day as if there is no tomorrow, because it simply won't work otherwise.
Це не вийде. Це треба працювати і тиснути. Деякі зміни в політиці...
We need to work and put pressure constantly. Some changes in the policies of certain countries due to elections may complicate these moments. We will have to get to know each other again, but we have to keep going.
Так, скажімо, ось. Але тим не менш...
My question about the enemy. What do you think can make Russia stop its aggression and start negotiations today? How do you assess their condition? And to what extent are we finally succeeding in breaking their desire to fight?
Воювати.
Стан. По-перше, економіка. Завдяки внутрішній своїй економіці.
As for their condition, Russia will not survive on its domestic economy, and the best option is for India, China and other countries to stop supporting Russian energy.
Енергоресурси. Не підтримали їх експорт.
Not to support Russian exports, simply to ban them. And they could take steps to reduce the price of Russian energy.
Я думаю, що після...
I think after that, within a year, Russia will not be able to fight at the same level.
По-перше, можна завтра зупинити Росію. Чесно.
Tomorrow is possible to stop Russia, honestly. China, India and the US, Saudi Arabia can do it quickly.
Швидко можуть це зробити. Просто швидко.
They can just sit down and say, look, what's the situation? There will be no economy in your country. For the next 6 months, we will completely shut down your energy sector and all your exports. The price of energy resources will go down. We're able to do it.
Зробити факт.
Is this a fact? Yes, it is.
Європейський Союз
There will be no exports from the Russian Federation to the European Union. I say no exports because actually they continue it.
воїни через
All my wars over grain are not for nothing. I just understand that we need to respect our neighbors. And it is the right thing to do. But I'm sorry, our grain is not exported. And for some reason, grain from Russia is exported. I think it's a strange story.
Я вважаю, що неадекватно і транзитується. І тому
I think it is not adequate. These serious countries that I mentioned have strong leverage on Russia.
які мають вплив важелі на Росію сильні. Вони
They are able to stop Russia, and without the economy, Russia is zero, because what is left in this case is only nuclear weapons.
зброя. І самі ці країни, про які я сказав,
And these countries which I mentioned will definitely not allow Putin to use nuclear weapons. Otherwise, it is a completely different story.
це зовсім тоді інша історія. Якщо є бажання у Китаю
If China wants to end the war quickly, it can do it together with these leaders.
бути з цими лідерами. У Сполучених Штатів є бажання. У Індії, я думаю, що вони більш схиляються до того.
The US do want it. I think India also wants to end this war as soon as possible. I think it is important.
Важливий момент. Тому не вистачає кілька країн.
So there are a few countries missing, but the only thing we can ask of them is to help us end the war.
Росію за стіл перемог.
To bring Russia to the negotiation table and end the war diplomatically with respect for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Чому Китай це не робить? Я думаю, після того, коли у нього реально сильно заблокований економічний європейський союз.
Why doesn't China do this? Well, I think you can block the European Union market. The European Union is just a colossus compared to Russia, because there are more than 600 million people.
В порівнянні з Росією, це просто глиба, тому що там 600 мільйонів більше.
And there, who are more financially capable than the 140 million in the Russian Federation.
40 мільйонів в Російській Федерації. Але
But for this to happen, the European Union needs to be willing to reach an agreement with China.
з Китаю. Тобто, в принципі, гру можна розписати економічно за один.
This scheme can be implemented in one day if these countries are really ready for it, if they are really ready to take the appropriate steps.
На відповідні кроки.
You ask me what we are doing for this.
А коли у деяких цих гравців немає цього бажання,
When some countries have no desire to do so for various reasons, China is getting cheap energy today.
ресурс отримує Китай сьогодні. Так їм потрібна довга війна чи коротка?
Do they want a long war or a short one? And Europe, realizing that the war is taking place on the European continent, has refused to give us cheap energy.
Енергоресурсу. Навіть багато з них реально
Even under the pressure of rising prices,
підвищення цін. Але тим не менше вистояли. Не всі. Ви бачите, які країни досі проти того чи іншого напрямку.
but not all the countries. You can see which countries still want to stop now and give Russia everything it wants.
Було і
And what are the reasons why they do this?
всюди,
It's money.
на жаль.
We must understand the reality. It is money, not morality.
Яка це не мораль? Мораль у тих країн, які розуміючи, що
Those countries that understand that they will lose money because of the sanctions and go along with it have morality, and the others have no morals.
ніякої немає моралі, вигідно або не вигідно. Я знаю країни, просто які не дуже великі країни, але я
They
знаю,
only think about their own benefit. The leaders of some not very big countries lost their status because of their support for Ukraine. We will talk about this when the war is over. The war will end anyway.
говоримо про це.
We will talk about it very frankly. So who contributed more?
І тому, коли говорять, як же нам
And so when they say, how do we stop the war? We have a formula. You cannot just offer populist formulas.
ні формули, просто ті чи інші відповідні кроки, коли ти так
When you are such a strong, big state, you can write down exactly what your formula is.
формула наступна, вона суто економічна, так і не пиши, відповідно.
It's purely economic. So write it down. Economic formula. Point 1, point 2, point 3.
Я думаю, що Китай може написати 3 пункти.
I think China can write 3 points after which Russia will realize that its economy will simply explode and their society will demolish the Kremlin in a year.
Вони змогли легко це
They could easily do this together with America, Saudi Arabia and Brazil very easily.
з Бразилією дуже.
Why don't they do it?
Ну, така в цьому і відповідь.
Well, yes, that's the question.
Вважаю, що у них є
I think they have their own internal different reasons.
We see the reaction of our partners when we have victories on the front line. And it is easier for our diplomats to work with our partners than long-range missiles. I would like to ask, if you have calculated the destiny of strikes on targets in the Russian Federation to make it work, and is it then possible to stop Russia, and in what time frame?
третій пункт щодо пакету стримування.
In the third point of the victory plan, everything is calculated. It specifies the target and the number of missiles and their cost.
Є кількість ракет і є вартість цього. І
It lists the number of targets and the number of missiles needed to hit those targets. The specific number of targets,
конкретна кількість,
the specific number of missiles, their range and their specific cost.
конкретна дальність і конкретна вартість всього цього пакету. Мало того, коли у Білому домі ми про це говорили,
But it is not enough. During the conversation at the White House, I said that the money that Congress voted to allocate is enough for our plans.
разом з контрактами, двосторонніми договорами про гарантії безпеки з лідерами інших країн 26, ну, всього там 30, але є контракти, де є конкретні гроші. Тобто всі ці гроші, їх
All this money will be enough to provide us with everything we need. There are specific calculations and there is a specific amount of money.
обов'язки, їх достатньо, щоб забезпечити нас цим пакетом. Тобто є конкретна математика, як ви сказали, є конкретні гроші. І на нашу думку, застосування цього пакету, якщо Росія не сідає,
If Russia doesn't want to come to the negotiation table and doesn't want to stop the war, this package will help us not only to weaken Russia's defense, but will help us to get a long pause.
ослаблення їх оборонки. А в принципі призведе до великої паузи, можливості відновлення їх цього сектору, їх сил, бойових сил. І тоді весь цей час ви можете або домовлятись,
And while they are recovering, we can negotiate with them. If they want or finish the off, it will be their choice.
Їх буде вибір. Хочете
If
домовитися?
they want to negotiate, let's do it. If they don't, then that's it.
Переваги у них ні в зброї, ні
Because they will have no advantage in weapons or anything else at that point.
час. Ось про що. Тому я і вважав, що це
That's why I say that this package is preventive. I think that if they are not fools, they will understand that they need to negotiate. Otherwise, we will use the package, and then there will be no point in negotiating with them.
пакет. І потім вже нема сенсу ні з ким домовитися.
They have to understand that they have to talk to us. It is beneficial for us not to lose people, not to lose time, not to lose these weapons. I don't go to a psychologist.
We are approaching to the end of the interview. I would like to ask you this question. Yesterday you were in Brussels. Today are you in Kyiv? Many Ukrainians are going through a difficult period because of the war. Some people go to see a psychologist, some don't. What helps you to keep going? What helps you to keep going? Because not many people want to be in your shoes right now.
Багато людей хочуть опинитися зараз, в цей момент.
То я думаю, що у багатьох людей своя сьогодні роль важлива і
Many people have their own role, an important and difficult one. I believe the adequate people, normal people, and decent people feel bad in times of war.
набагато гірше, ніж час миру. Але ми вважаємо,
Much worse than in peacetime. But I think that each of us considers it our duty, which we fulfill. I think we are holding on simply on human relations.
що на людських відносинах. Я на цьому тримаюсь, чесно. Ну, є діти,
That's what keeps me going. Honestly, my children, wife, and parents are supporting me.
батьки, то ми ще діти, значить. Да.
This means that I am still a child myself. We talk, we get together, we talk about something good. That's my support.
На цій підтримці. Людину побачив, я дуже мало знаходжу.
I'm rarely outside, but if I meet someone, I can say hello.
Там, ну, просто привітався, ну, вже непогано.
You can meet quite different people.
Можна зустріти
You can meet different people, but this is what we are defending. This is democracy, that you can meet different people.
різну людину.
Якщо
If we are talking about emotions, sometimes many people are in a bad mood
от правда
because there is no consensus. Our partners do not allow us to use long-range weapons, and enemy drones are flying at night.
шахеди літають,
Please reassure us.
спокойте нас.
Won't the West get tired of helping us?
Ми не дамо їм.
We will not let them get tired. We have no right to do so. It is our duty.
І я вчора
Everyone is worried. No one knows how the elections in the US will end.
І вчора було дуже приємно, що лідери Європейського Союзу, головні лідери, я б навіть так сказав, від яких багато
And yesterday I was very pleased that the leaders of the EU, on whom a lot depends, told me that there is a plan B in case America changes its policy.
Америка змінить свою політику. Ми повинні розраховувати на те, що ми повинні весь цей тягар.
They want to take on this burden. I think that was the right signal to us.
Дуже правильний сигнал. Дай Бог, щоб люди, як ви сказали, люди
People are different, and God willing, people will answer for their words with their actions.
відповідали за свої слова вчинками.
Thank you for the interview.
Дуже
Thank you.